Welcome back to the ChronCast. I am Alex Rickman, joined as always by Zach Mason. Ryan Gorovitz cannot be here today. He did send a message to share. He just wants everybody to know that he believes Austin Matthews went to Germany to get a Turkish hair transplant rather than to deal with his concussion problems. Joining us in his absence are Maayan Zilbershtein from the Canadian Soccer Source podcast, and a new guest, Jeronimo Pereira. Jeronimo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Jeronimo. I am a somewhat part member of Albion while simultaneously working for the Vancouver Whitecaps at the same time. And I'm also undefeated at every Canucks game I've gone in my lifetime.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Speaking of games, let's just get into it now and talk about last game against the Rangers. At time of recording, this is the last game. We're recording this Saturday morning, a few hours ahead of us taking on the Senators. Personally, I think that was, especially coming off the news, which we'll get into a little bit later, about JT Miller taking his leave of absence, dropping right before that game. Expectations were fairly low because of the weakened roster, but I thought that was a very solid effort from the team overall. Couple of leaky defensive moments, I think, especially from the Soucy-Myers pairing, which has at times just found ways to be like crazy, scary, spooky, hilarious, whatever you want to call it, just all over the place from them this year. But I think overall the performance was solid and shows maybe things are going to start turning a corner here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The Rangers game definitely was like much of an improvement from Nashville.
Yeah.
From what I saw. Definitely a step up from a few players in the bottom line as well. They were having good games. Thought Heinen was pretty decent. And Brandstrom has been in a good streak of form as well. But yeah, it was definitely a better game. A bit unfortunate there at the end. It was a silly giveaway there. And yeah, Soucy and Myers need to step it up a bit.
Yeah, like I saw some stats on them earlier, which I sent to you guys before the show. They have some of the better analytics of some of the pairings in the entire NHL, which I was just shocked to see that, because on the ice, when you're watching the two of them play, it just looks messy every time. They just seem very uncoordinated. We know Tyler Myers has been error prone pretty much his entire tenure in Vancouver, but Soucy was a lot better than this last year, I think. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a trade here at some point. I also wonder if maybe you see, like you mentioned, Erik Brandstrom has been absolutely incredible so far this year. I wonder if we see maybe him get moved up to play with one of them. Ideally, I think Carson Soucy. I don't know how comfortable I'd be throwing him to the Wolves with Myers. But yeah, no, feels like things are starting to turn a corner. We have some issues still, but they all feel like they're correctable. And I think getting guys like, we've just gotten Dakota Joshua back. That seems to be helping things. We'll get Brock Besser back at some point here. We'll get Thatcher Demko back soon. Stuff like that will help, but it seems like maybe we're starting to find our way again.
Yeah, just on the Soucy and Myers stat, I think it's an important reminder to not only trust stats and also trust the eye test. Because, I mean, when you watch them, it's a very different story compared to that stat you sent.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't even really have much else to say. I haven't watched many Canucks games this year, but that's the best I'll give you.
Fair enough. Yeah, so road trip starting again tonight at time of recording. Game against the Senators. I think playing against a team like Ottawa, you really need to see them get a result here. These are points that you're going to need to be stockpiling early in the season. But yeah, just hoping for a good road trip here. Hoping to see maybe Besser and Demko come back at some point on this trip. And I think it's important to remember, I just want to touch on this, when both of them really, but especially with Demko because of how long he's been out, I think it's important that fans remember to have some patience with him when he's back and not expect him to be the full Thatcher Demko the second he's back out on the ice.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. But also, let's just quickly touch on JT Miller's leave of absence. So, to those who are unaware, earlier this week it was announced that JT Miller would be taking a leave of absence from the team for an unknown amount of time. Not 100% sure what the cause is, but it appears to be something to do with rehabbing from an injury. Just want to quickly first of all, obviously wish JT the best here. Important part of the team, but more important that he's able to get himself right here. But it's a big hole to fill with JT Miller, and I think it's important that we talk about how Elias Pettersson has been doing lately and how he seems to be finding his way again, and maybe he can help replace some of that production we're losing in Miller.
Yeah, for sure. I went to the Canucks Blackhawks game last weekend, and Pettersson was excellent. I thought he was really good. He got the first star. Totally deserved it. I saw a lot of people saying JT Miller deserved it because he got more points, but I was like, I don't think so. I think Petey was the best player on the ice, and he also scored an empty net. So, but yeah, Petey's been really good. He's been bouncing back. Also had a decent game against the Rangers and Nashville, and I think seeing this, upward climb from him since his birthday, it's a really good sign of good things to come, especially when we have, a few players injured like Brock Besser and all of that. We do really need a game changer right now.
Yeah, and it just seems like when you're watching him play, he looks like he's got a lot of his confidence back. He seems like he's willing to take the shot. He's willing to just turn his brain off and play rather than start thinking about what he's doing. And what I've really liked is the chemistry on his line with DeBrusk and Sherwood. I think Kiefer Sherwood especially has been one of our best players so far this season, just with how aggressive he is and how much he can, like how much his forechecking can create. But I think this is a line that I wouldn't have expected to see per se, but I think going forward, that could be a really solid line.
Yeah, I think with Pettersson, it's just last season, obviously during the playoffs, went on a pretty cold streak, which it happens to every player at some point or another, which just happened at the most unfortunate timing possible, during the most important games of the season. But it's good to see him back to, the Pettersson that we expect, considering, the contract he's on and just general stuff he's done in previous years. So hopefully that continues, especially with the absence of Miller now.
Moving on from talking about Elias Pettersson, just going to talk about his line in particular with DeBrusk and Sherwood and how that's been working the last couple games. You'd obviously like to see a bit more production from Jake DeBrusk in terms of scoring with what we're paying him right now, but I think he's been quite solid playing alongside Pettersson in terms of his all-around game. Sherwood especially, I think, has been one of our best signings, or possibly our best move of the offseason, has just looked fantastic in every area of the ice. I think his forechecking is creating a lot. Kind of reminiscent of guys like, and we can talk about this line next, Connor Garland and Dakota Joshua last year, who just brought so much energy to any line they played on and just seemed to be able to elevate whoever they're with.
Yeah, for sure. I'm quite the Garland admirer myself. He really just, he loves getting in there. He's he's not the tallest guy, not the strongest guy, but he's the guy on the team that uses his body the most.
Yeah.
And considering we have some pretty big and tall guys, and that takes a lot of bravery and confidence.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's been really good so far in the start of the season. It's good to see Dakota Joshua back as well and seeing how that pairing will grow throughout the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's still in the scoring and doing his little Garland signature moves behind the net. It really adds to the creativity on every line he's on.
No, it's definitely scary, especially to see, why Joshua was out in the offseason with the cancer diagnosis and everything. But since that line has gotten back together, they're really ticking again. Garland, like you said, has been fantastic this season with whoever he's been playing with. It's amazing to see how many puck battles he wins, especially as I believe actually tied for the lightest forward in the NHL. But I'll use this metaphor because I'm with some fellow Liverpool supporters here. He reminds me a lot in the way of Andy Robertson, where it's just he's not the biggest guy, but nobody ever seems to tell him that he's not big.
Mm-hmm.
He's just got that tenacity.
Comparison I was thinking of, which is also a soccer one, is someone like N'Golo Kante, which position wise doesn't really make sense, especially because in hockey positions don't really apply like soccer. But he wins every battle. He's a lot smaller than everyone else on the ice or pit or whatever. But he goes in there with the mentality that he will win the puck, win the ball, whichever one you want to talk about in this case.
Yeah.
And I think they're pretty similar in that case. And N'Golo Kante in those days at Leicester and Chelsea, is pretty similar to what we see in Connor Garland.
Yeah, no, not a metaphor I would have thought of, but it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. It's accurate. I wouldn't have thought of it because, again, part of my Robertson comparison too is you have a fullback and a winger, so it's kind of positionally a little more in there. But no, Kante is a pretty good comparison for him. I think he's just in there like a dirty shirt every play, and he's gonna come out of that pile with the puck, regardless of who he's in there with. And what I like about that line too is it seems like whatever center you put, it's been Garland a lot this year, but now that Joshua's back with them, whatever center you put on that line, be it Elias Pettersson, Teddy Bluger, Kiefer Sherwood, Pius Suter, just their game will get elevated. We saw this with Lindholm in the playoffs after he had kind of a bad regular season showing with the Canucks, but just it's just so nice to see that line again. I think that's going to be a big part of getting the team going again, is getting them back together.
Yeah, for sure. Totally
Yeah.
agree. And
Yeah.
also want to touch upon there was like this one play in the Canucks Blackhawks game where Garland made like a defensive effort, and like it just really shows like there was like no one in the stadium who really like recognized that defensive effort, but it was like it just stopped the counterattack and just really shows like both sides of the puck. Like he's
Yeah.
just a really good player and really good mentality, and he does the dirty work.
Yeah, they're totally the perfect players for like Rick Tocchet style of play, where he just wants you the constant aggression. They're just like such high motors in both of them. Sherwood as well are like this, but it's just. I was at one point when it seemed like Garland was going to be staying in the top 6, wondering if we were going to see Kiefer Sherwood and Dakota Joshua as wingers on the same line. I was just thinking that would be exciting because I believe Joshua. I may be wrong here, so don't put too much stock in this, but he may have led all forwards in the NHL in hits last year, and I believe Sherwood is currently on pace to just smash the record for hits in a season. I think he's averaging like 8 a game, so
Wow.
like that would have been a fun pair, but either way, it seems like we found something that works, so happy to see it. I would like to, before we move on to you guys getting your soccer segment in, I would like to quickly touch on our defense a little more. We've obviously talked a bit about Susie and Myers. We've talked about how Brandstrom's been. So it seems like we're likely to be trading for somebody. I would like to just kind of float an idea. This is normally, if you guys don't have strong opinions on this, then let me know and I can just yap myself. But would you guys consider moving Brandstrom above either Carson Soucy or Tyler Myers at this point into a top 4 role, giving him more ice time? Or if we were to make a trade for a defenseman, which it seems like we will do at some point, given the aggression of our front office, moving Soucy and Myers down to being the bottom defensive pairing and putting Brandstrom and a new guy on a second.
Yeah, I actually quite agree with this, like as a short-term solution,
Mhm.
because it sometimes just feels like when you have like 2 big defensemen and they're like too focused on, doing kind of the same things. Myers and Soucy are like pretty similar players, but you've got like Quinn Hughes and Hronik who are like, they kind of balance each other out. Hronik's like the more defensive guy. Then you also got Quinn Hughes, just a fast skater, really good on the puck. So I think Brandstrom can kind of be like that creator in the back and have kind of like that big defensive guy right beside him, whether it be Myers or Soucy. So I could possibly maybe see that happening as a short-term solution, because it just feels like it's kind of an imbalance right now with Soucy and Myers in there.
Yeah. Maayan, you have any thoughts on this or not really?
Absolutely nothing, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Zach, what are your thoughts on your giraffe brother potentially being dropped to the bottom pair?
I could see it making sense. The problem is that I wouldn't immediately trade for someone and put Brandstrom in the top 4. I'd say maybe while we're trying to find someone to partner with Brandstrom, we put him in the top 4 just to see if he can swim already in that role, because it feels like it'd be pretty stupid to give up, say, a second and a third round pick for a top 4 defenseman, and then the guy you partner him with flounders even worse than what we had before.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. I think it matters, especially what kind of profile you're getting in another defenseman too, whether or not you would want to partner him with someone like Soucy or someone like Brandstrom. But no, all worth considering. All right, so with that all being said, let's move over to soccer talk. Maybe starting us off with not the most fun of topics for us to discuss, but let's talk about the Whitecaps playoff exit.
Yeah. So the Whitecaps, for those who don't know, finished in the 8th seed in the MLS regular season, which means I don't know how much you guys have talked about it. Have you guys talked about it at all?
Not really, because we kind of accidentally forgot to record an episode for a month.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
So the Whitecaps were in the wild card round, which is the 8 versus 9 seed, supposed to host a game against the Portland Timbers, who finished in the 9 seed. Couldn't host that game because BC Place was hosting a motocross event a few days after the game was scheduled, so they have to set up the stadium, meaning that the game had to be played in Portland in front of Portland's fans. I was one of the 60 or 70 or so Whitecaps fans that were able to go to Portland for that game, and I mean, obviously, I was disappointed with the fact that we couldn't play at BC Place, but wasn't exactly disappointed that with the result of the Whitecaps game, because it was a lovely 5-0 win for the Whitecaps. Hat trick from
Light
Ryan
work.
Gold. Yeah. When playing against defense as bad as the Timbers, that kind of adds up a little bit. So yeah, 5-0 win. Ryan Gold, the Caps' best player by far, gets a hat trick. Stuart Armstrong, the new DP signing, gets one. Brian White gets one. Perfect. Move on to round one against LAFC, who are the number one seed in the Western Conference, best team in the West. Just an all-around fantastic team. Round one of the MLS playoffs is a best of three series. So first game of said series was pretty evenly matched, I would say, until one poor giveaway from the Whitecaps in the midfield. LAFC go back the other way, win a penalty kick from a handball by Tristan Blackman. Score it 1-0 for LAFC going into halftime. Score a second in the second half, and by that point, it's like Whitecaps still playing well, but it can be very hard to come back. Ryan Gault scores a goal in the 94th minute. Doesn't mean anything because there's no aggregate scores because it's a best of three series. Go back to BC Place for game two. This time we were able to play at BC Place, which is a positive. Whitecaps started off the game brilliantly. Ryan Gault scores like 8 minutes in or 10 minutes in, something like that. 3 minutes later, he plays a ball in. It goes off of Ryan Hollingshead, an LAFC defender, makes it 2-0. LAFC had some chances in the game. Yohei Takaoka, the Caps goalkeeper, came up pretty big. And then in the second half, Ryan Gauld plays a ball into the Whitecaps striker, Brian White. It comes off of
Eddie Segura?
Eddie Segura, I think it was, yeah. An LAFC defender who put it in his own net, so a second own goal, and the Whitecaps win 3-0. I think that might be the best Whitecaps game I've ever seen, just in terms of the stakes of it and, the overall performance. Like LAFC, like I said, had some chances, but it really didn't mean that much in the end because they didn't finish any of them off. Like, limited Denny Bouanga's chances pretty well, and he is like top 5 player in the league probably. And then going into game 3, obviously lots of confidence, and Whitecaps started off the game really well. I think the Whitecaps were the better team in the first half of that game, and then just one mistake in the midfield, just like in game 1. Mistake in the midfield. Andres Kubas misplaces a header. It goes straight to Mateusz Bogusz from LAFC, who takes a touch around. Ranko Veselinovic puts in the back of the net. Whitecaps aren't able to respond at that point, and ends 1-0 for LAFC, and the Whitecaps are done. So,
Yeah. It was
overall... Oh, yeah, Trauma, go ahead.
Yeah, it was definitely an unfortunate ending. I do feel like it was a really kind of like sort of successful playoff tenure. It was definitely better footy than we saw during the regular season, especially at that last end.
Yeah.
So yeah, that Portland game was definitely a surprise considering we'd had lost like, 5 straight or something like that beforehand.
Yeah, it was something like that. Like, winless in the last, 7 games of the season. So, I think genuinely, if the Whitecaps had played in the first round of the playoffs, any team that wasn't an LA team, so LAFC or the LA Galaxy, it would have advanced. But you've got no one to blame but yourself when you didn't win a game for the last month of the season. Can't do anything. You lost 3-0 to Seattle at home. You lost to Minnesota. Just a lot of bad performances to end the season. And then, yeah, the Portland game was definitely a surprise because it was nothing like what we had seen in the last, even 2 months of the season. Yeah, it was I think the last win the Whitecaps had before going into the playoffs would have been September 14th against the San Jose Earthquakes, and the wild card game against Portland was on October 23rd. So it's over a month between the last win the Whitecaps had and then the 5-0 in Portland. So at the end of the day, I think it was a really great performance, all things considered, in the playoffs. First the Portland game and then the 3-game series against LAFC, where you could argue the Whitecaps were the better team overall. And if it was scored on aggregate, the Whitecaps would be advancing with a 4-3 win. But obviously that's not the case, so Whitecaps aren't through. And Yeah, I think it's hard to call this season a success though, because well, the result ended up being the same as last season and kind of even worse because you finished in a lower spot lower spot than last season. Expectations were a home playoff game, which would be a top four seed, and yeah, I don't know. It's just it was tough all around because the Whitecaps I think deserved more going into it and should have gotten more out of it just overall. But once again, if you had performed better in the regular season, you wouldn't have faced LAFC. Probably would have gotten out of the first round, and then from then on, it's a single knockout every game, and you never know what happens with those.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, for
is
sure.
there optimism going into next season?
Yeah, I
That's all I
guess
can say.
I'll
Yeah.
touch upon it a bit during that those playoff games. I thought Ryan Gauld was absolutely excellent. Probably
Hmm.
the best version of Ryan Gauld we've ever seen with that hat trick, and also throughout like every LAFC game, he was really good. And I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised that he'd still be a top five player in the playoffs
Yeah.
after the playoffs are over in MLS. And I also do want to say I had a like midterm during the Whitecaps Portland game, and I was really upset with like our last few performances and stuff like that. But just like getting out of the midterm and then looking at the score at halftime and seeing 3-0, I was just like, what is going on? And I go to watch the goals and they're like even crazier. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, it's like incredible performance.
I can remember I was hoping to go on that Portland trip with Maayan and the others who went, but I was unable due to an appointment I had that day. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, well, we're probably going to lose anyway, so it's not like I'm going to go miss some big win or something.
Hmm.
Then having a couple friends over to watch the game and just thinking, there's no way this is real, right? I'm hallucinating.
Oh, trust me, it was
Just,
the exact same feeling in the stadium.
oh, must
Like
have been.
seeing
Oh, God.
that Ryan Gauld like volley chip over James Pantemis, who is a Canadian goalkeeper, started over Max Crepeau, who is Canada's number one goalkeeper, even though he wasn't in this last international window. Yeah, some people here don't necessarily like Max Crepeau too much, and I can't say I blame them.
Wonder who that could be.
Uh, Producing that has done some some gestures that I won't be speaking of, but yeah, you can probably understand what I'm referring to. Yeah, so that Ryan Gauld chip over James Pantemis, the Matias Laborda like flicking it over a defender to then play it across for Brian White. It was just like genuinely, I thought it was like a fever dream. That's what it felt like. And then had like a 7 hour bus ride back to Vancouver after, and like I think I slept for maybe an hour, but I couldn't care less.
Yeah, just so crazy. I guess I'll probably just to end off, probably give a big shout out to Stuart Armstrong, who I thought was really good
Hmm.
almost every game in the playoffs as well. Um, really like added a lot to our midfield. I thought it was really good that he was playing a bit deeper
Hmm.
and playing on like a more transitional position. Um, and his connections with Gauld were like really good in the Portland game, and I thought he had a really good game against LAFC, especially in that third game.
Hmm.
So wondering why he was subbed off a
I
little
know.
early, but yeah, I guess got to give some flowers to Armstrong as well. I'm really excited to see what he can do next season, full fitness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the addition of Armstrong not only was his connection with God really good, but also just it freed up God to be able to do a lot more because the Lakers moved to a midfield three, and it just lets God basically roam around wherever he wants to, which is what we want to see from him because ideally you get him on the ball whenever you can. And
Yeah, he's
he's,
not a player you want to put in a box. You want to let him
yeah,
be free.
exactly. He just runs around wherever he wants to. We saw it in his cameos with the Scottish national team as well in this past international window. Like he came off the bench and just was he was just brilliant. Like he nutmegged Luka Modric in one of his first touches in the Croatia game. Like one play he like the commentator made a comment on him not running up to the ball to try and shoot from outside the box. And then Croatia ended up winning the ball. Galt sprinted back the entire length of the pitch and then made a really great tackle in the box. to prevent Croatia from scoring, essentially. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's the Ryan Gauld way of just running around wherever he wants to and doing whatever he wants with the ball.
Working class MVP.
Exactly.
Don't know. Yeah, I think we got time. Let's just quickly talk about the rest of the MLS playoffs. What are you guys expecting and hoping to see the rest of the way?
I guess I'll start off.
Yeah.
I thought the upsets were really good during that first round of the playoffs. It's been really good MLS playoffs so far. Obviously, Atlanta causing an upset. We've got Minnesota causing kind of a predicted upset.
Yeah.
And then you also saw the likes of NYCFC and Matt Freese pull off like incredible performances. But I'm really excited to see that Hudson River derby at the time of recording, and it is in a few
About an hour
hours.
till kickoff, I think.
Yeah, an hour till kickoff. So that'll be a very exciting game. And then you've got LAFC versus Seattle tonight as well. Not really sure what I want from that game.
Can they both lose?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Like, somehow they both forfeit. Whitecaps centered. Whitecaps through to the conference final. You know.
We get like a Whitecaps Houston wild card match in there or something. I don't know.
No, Houston don't deserve it. They lost in pens to Seattle twice. We can have this one.
My God, that Hector Herrera.
Oh
my God.
Carrasquilla as well. First game, like Houston Dynamo, like against Seattle in the first round. Game 1, they end up losing in a penalty shootout. Their probably second best player, Coco Carrasquilla, gets a red card for just shoving Jackson Reagan, Seattle player, who was just on the ground, and then like trying to punch like 3 other Seattle players. Just stupid from him. They lose game 1, and then game 2 in Houston, which they also end up losing in a penalty shootout. Hector Herrera commits a foul, which is pretty obviously a yellow card. He gets the yellow card. He complains to the ref. Then as he walks past the ref, he spits at him, which is like the most obvious red card in the world. And like Hector Herrera is by far Houston's best player. Now he's gone. They haven't renewed his contract for next season. It's just an embarrassing way to go out for them.
Yeah, for sure.
But
yeah.
JMO, one thing you didn't mention in the first round was the New York Red Bulls Columbus series, which
I was just thinking of that one.
might be my favorite matchup of round 1, because like obviously Atlanta beating Miami is by far the biggest upset you'll ever see. One of the biggest upsets ever in North American sports in the playoffs. But yeah, like Columbus is just, there's something about the way they play that's so fascinating, and we've seen it under Wilfried Nancy. Like obviously they won MLS Cup last year. We saw that. It was brilliant. And the Red Bulls just matched it brilliantly and were the better team over those 2 games, and rightfully, won game 1, 1-0, and then game 2 came back from a deficit after a Max Arston goal, took the lead. Then Columbus equalized with Christian Ramirez like 96th minute or something, and then they win the penalty shootout in front of their home crowd, and the 7 seed knocks out the 2 seed. Like, it's crazy because Columbus are just so dominant in everything they do, and the Red Bulls just completely erased all of that. It was just a tactical masterclass. And I'm very excited for this upcoming game between them and NYCFC. Another game I'm excited for is Orlando Atlanta, because it's a rematch of which I think is tomorrow at like 12:30, something like that, our time. It's a rematch of what you had on decision day, which is the reason that Atlanta even made the playoffs in the first place, because they finished as the 9 seed, which is even crazier. Finished as the 9 seed. I didn't think they would beat Montreal in the wildcard game. Not only do they do that, they then go on and beat Inter Miami in a 3-game series. But yeah, they were up 2-1 against Orlando. Orlando scored like a last-minute equalizer. Duncan McGuire scores for Orlando, and then it's ruled out for a handball, which is the reason that Atlanta ended up finishing in the 9 seed instead of, I think it would have been DC United otherwise. So just insane, and it's what I love about MLS is that everything's just so unexpected. Like, you don't know what's coming next, or anything of the sort.
So just before we quickly move on to just a different topic within soccer, just want to ask, do you guys have any team who you would consider the favorite right now for the MLS Cup?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do you have any in mind, mine?
For me, it should be one of the LA teams. Like, if they are, no, you're assuming that LAFC beat Seattle and LA Galaxy beat Minnesota, but then I don't really know who comes out on top of that Western Conference Final because LA Galaxy have like by far the best attack, one of the best attacks you've seen in MLS history. Like Dejan Jovic, I'm talking about Ricky Puig, who's like one of the best players in the league. Gabriel Peck, Joseph Painsil, Marco Royce, who's just on the bench. Like, they've just got insane amounts of talent, but then their back line is pretty shaky.
Yeah.
And then there's LAFC, who are just like this amazing, well-oiled machine who also have some of the best players in the league. And I think, assuming they both win their conference semifinal matchups, I think that series really relies on whether or not LAFC can really get Olivier Giroud involved. Because I think if they can, they should be able to beat the Galaxy just playing through Giroud and him doing what he can do and what he's done for like the French national team all these years and wherever else he's going, Milan, Arsenal, Chelsea, like whatever. So yeah, my favorite is one of the LA teams, but I really don't know which one would be. Like, I don't think anyone from the East has a chance against the two of them.
I'd mostly agree with that. I'm not too sure about LAFC though. I thought they did not play well at all against us throughout those 3 games. Probably like the least deserving team that made it through to the second round.
Tell us how you really feel.
Like what I say that without bias, to be honest, because I do feel like they didn't play great football.
They were pretty shocking at times.
Yeah, and also I think Cherundolo completely got it wrong the first 2 games playing a 2-man midfield, and you can see like he subbed on a twist in the 3rd game, and that really changed everything. But yeah, it really depends if Cherundolo gets his tactics right. I could see LAFC moving on, but I wouldn't be surprised to see like a Seattle upset in there. But I would say probably my favorite from the Western Conference side is probably LA Galaxy. And then from the Eastern Conference, I mean, probably all these teams you didn't expect them to go through, aside from maybe Orlando. But I think possibly could see the Red Bulls in there. It'd be a really good story from the Red Bulls, and I thought they played probably the best football out of every team on the East. So yeah.
Yeah, I think with LAFC, I'll just say one more thing and then we can move on. With LAFC, this is like, I'm saying everything that I'm saying, assuming that Cherundolo does play a 3-man midfield. I read, Matt Doyle's column on the MLS website, which featured a tweet that I made, like not trying to brag or anything. But yeah, and it was just about that 3-man midfield because, JMO, like you said, as soon as Cherundolo made that change in Game 3, LAFC dominated the game. And it's something I didn't touch on because I was rambling on for quite a bit anyways. But yeah, it's LAFC changed to the 3-man midfield and Whitecaps couldn't handle that. And that's partially because Vanni Sartini didn't change anything really tactically and LAFC just played their game. But it's also partially because LAFC just, when they want to, they can be as dominant as they want. And yeah, assuming they play a 3-man midfield, assuming they, on top of that, can get Olivier Giroud involved in the game, they should be the team to beat. Like, they are the team that should make it to MLS Cup and win it. Especially because they've got home field advantage all the way through because of the decision drama with them and the Galaxy in Houston.
Yeah, for sure. About the Matt Doyle thing, I will brag about something real quick. Extra Time did start off.
I know what it is. Yeah.
Extra Time podcast did start off with a tweet I made, so there's my little brag as well.
All right, but just to counter that, early in the season, in like March, I sent in like a question to their podcast talking about saying that if Matias Laborda keeps up his performances, he might he should be a candidate for the Dom Theorem Player of the Year, which I don't think Alex and Zach know what it is. It's basically when a player struggles in his first season with the club, and then
Yeah.
in seasons when he really flourishes. And as the host of the podcast, Andrew Weeby, was reading that out, he said something like, what was it? Like, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something about me and like, we know you always listen to the show, Maayan, like really appreciate it. Like, just my heart.
But
All
do you
that
have
build up
open
for him to not
DMs?
remember the quote.
But do you have open DMs with Andrew Eby?
Okay, well, I've had Tom Bogo on my podcast, so there's levels to this.
Fair enough. Okay, we're even.
And we've had Maayan Zilbershtein on ours. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
as we move off this, let's talk about Canada's Nation League performance against Suriname.
Okay, time for me to ramble on for another like 15 minutes. So, game one of it was a 2-game series this time. Aggregate scoring does come into play, like in MLS. It was the Nations League quarterfinal. Now, yeah, Canada against Suriname. Obviously, Canada were the very clear favorites. And with that, first game was played in Suriname. The conditions of the pitch were horrible. Nothing was like it didn't look like a game of soccer, a game of football, whatever you want to call it. It just like the ball was bouncing around weirdly. The way Suriname played, they just had like 10 men behind the ball all the time. So you can't take much from that game tactically. And then Canada subbed on Junior Hoylett pretty late in the game. And Junior Hoylett, who hadn't featured in a Canada game since I don't even know when, because he wasn't at the Copa America camp. I think he got injured or maybe just wasn't called up. I'm not too sure. I don't remember. But he's the one who gets the goal for Canada to make it 1-0 and give the Canada the important away goal because CONCACAF does still use the away goals rule, which you've seen wiped off in like UEFA Champions League and whatnot. Um, so yeah, Canada win the first leg 1-0, go into the second leg in Toronto expecting big things, and that's exactly what you got. You see, first goal of the game comes from Jonathan David, one of the hottest strikers in the world right now, behind like Victor Gyökeres. He scores the first goal of the game, like I don't remember the exact minute, but then a couple minutes later, Jacob Schaffelberg latches onto a long ball because he's just really fast, gets to it before the goalkeeper, and then finishes in front of the empty net. Schaffelberg just destroyed this backline all game because he's the kind of player who fits Jesse Marsh's system brilliantly, like really well. He's just super fast, super direct, and that's what you want from someone like him and someone in a Jesse Marsh system. Yeah, and then third goal comes from Kyle Larin on the right hand side. He plays it to Jacob Schaffelberg, who finishes it off. Game ends 3-0. Canada advance, and they'll play Mexico now. In the Nations League semifinals in March.
Yeah, I couldn't catch either of the games, but I did watch the highlights, and it was great to see Junior Hoylett back in camp and getting that goal. Really good to see from him. Obviously, you can't really, like you said, you can't really take away much from that game. It's a game in Suriname, and it's not the
It's a
best
proper
conditions.
CONCACAF game.
Yeah, proper CONCACAF. Lot of fans were questioning the result, but I'm like, you got your result, you got the W, that's all that matters. And then that second game, and Schaffelberg was amazing. Like you said, Kyle Larin also played a really nice ball to him for that second goal. But yeah, hopefully Jacob Schaffelberg makes a move outside of the MLS. I think he really deserves it. Hasn't been like all that great with Nashville, but to be fair, Nashville
Yeah, I
haven't
think
really had
it's
a
because it's
steady
Nashville.
coach.
Like
Yeah, for
they've
sure.
got their way of playing is just Hani Mukhtar, and that's pretty much it. It's just get the ball to Hani Mukhtar, try to get him to produce magic.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, hopefully he goes to could see him probably excel in maybe championship or
somewhere like
possibly
the
even
Netherlands, maybe like
yeah, exactly.
Belgium. those
Yeah.
kinds of leagues in general, like that kind of level, I think he'd do really well. Somewhere where, there isn't too much pressure put on you, but yeah, like you see, Promise David is doing really well in Belgium right now, and you would expect him to get a Canada call up sometime soon from Jesse Marsh. One big thing from this window is that, first of all, Max Crepeau didn't play either of the games against Suriname. It was Dane St. Clair who who got the start, and I think he played really well in both games. He hardly put a foot wrong. There wasn't much for him to do overall, but he did what he was supposed to do. And then Canada were missing Derek Cornelius due to injury. Who didn't play with Marseille today either. He's still injured. I'm not sure exactly when he'll be back, but hoping it'll be soon. So first game it was Joel Waterman who got the start next to Moise Bombito, who's a player very close to my heart. Those who know. Um, and then second game it was Kamal Miller who got very scarred up in that second game. Got like a knee to the head, ended up bleeding, like got subbed off eventually, but he did it for the badge. No. And then obviously no Alfonso Davies in this camp either. He's not injured. I think it was more of a personal decision to avoid the risk of injury, I think. And it was maybe a decision that was made by his club, Bayern Munich, as well, which I kind of understand. It's a window against Suriname. Like you're not gonna need all of your best players in.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree too. And a lot of people were questioning, him being the captain and everything. But
Yeah.
obviously, these players in Europe have these European players now have insane schedules. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I think we even saw Virgil van Dijk leaving camp for Netherlands game
Yeah.
early. Mo Salah, I think, wasn't called up either.
Yeah, Kylian Mbappe didn't play with France in this last window.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's it's fine. It's whatever. I don't think it's anything to worry about. It's just gotta rest these players because they're getting overplayed with these insane schedules sometimes.
Yeah, I will say the whole captaincy. I wasn't the biggest fan of Davies as a captain, and I still think Stefan Eustáquio would be a better captain. But it's
Yeah, I
my
agree.
issue isn't anything to do with him not coming to this camp. It's just general stuff of your best player doesn't have to be your leader,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And yeah,
Yeah, it's nothing against Davies, but Eustachio does, at least to me, strike me more as the leadership type, but
or
anyway.
even
I
someone
agree.
like Alistair Johnston. Alistair Johnston wore the armband for Celtic a couple weeks ago for a game. Scored in that game as well, I think. By the way, his goal contribution numbers as a right back have been brilliant this year. It's great to see. He just signed a new contract with Celtic, which is great for him. I think it's a great place for him to be at. He clearly loves being in Glasgow. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about.
I'm also going to back the Alistair Johnson as captain choice purely because he's a Canucks fan. As we talk on that, let's maybe move to Europe a little bit. We're going to keep this short so that Zach doesn't try to kill us all, but that City result today.
Yeah, just about half an hour.
Who could have foreseen that?
I think I saw somewhere that this is Manchester City have now lost 5 games in a row in all competitions, which is the first time that's happened to them since April of 2006. It's the first time in Pep Guardiola's career as a manager that he's lost 5 straight in all comps. He's not done it with Barca, Bayern, City.
Hearing sacked in the morning chants at a City game was just...
It's a fever dream.
Yeah, no, that cannot be real.
I loved every second of that game, especially because my fantasy Premier League team has James Maddison who scored a brace and Pedro Porro who scored the 3rd goal and got a clean sheet. So yeah, pretty happy about that. And happy as a Liverpool fan because we're currently 5 points clear, playing Southampton tomorrow morning. You should expect a decently easy win with that. Hopefully, I was gonna knock on wood. Yeah, it's you could go 8 points clear, and then for Liverpool, this upcoming week is going to be a really tough one, and really one where you're going to get tested a lot because you've got Real Madrid in Champions League midweek, and while they haven't been great in the Champions League and just in general this year, they're still Real Madrid. They
It's
still
Real
have like
Madrid.
on paper it's the best attack in the world and maybe best team in the world. Liverpool's currently top of the table in 2 different leagues. But yeah, you've got
Still
that
haven't
midweek.
beaten them above us in the table.
I wonder why that is. And then on Saturday you've got Manchester City at home, which will be
I think it'll be a comfortable win.
should be. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd hope so. City do have, I think it's Feyenoord midweek in Champions,
Yes.
which will hopefully, or not hopefully, but for them, hopefully that means like a bounce back win, especially because their last Champions League game was the 4-1 loss to Sporting, where Gyökeres scored a hat trick, and Ruben Amorim, the new Manchester United coach, already beating City before joining United, which is something United fans will love to see. I'm really sorry about all of this, Zach, but all I'm saying is
The fact that we
They're
don't
gonna
have
be-
video for this podcast is really detracting from, I think, the experience of the listener, because Zach is just slowly sunk lower and lower in his chair the more we talked about this.
but yeah,
Yeah, you're all comedians, aren't you?
yeah. Well, City are going to be hoping for a bounce back win midweek against Bayern and use that momentum to go to Anfield, one of the hardest grounds to play at just in the world, and get a win. I think, not as hard as like playing in Bolivia, but that's a different story.
Okay.
No, it was nothing against you, James. It's an example I had. Yeah, Liverpool are thriving, City are not. Tottenham are doing Tottenham things where they give Ipswich their first Premier League win in like 20-something years, and then beat City twice within like 2 weeks. Like,
With Timo
Steal from the
Werner,
rich, give to the poor.
oh man, they're like, it's the most Tottenham thing ever.
It really is.
Get those types of results. I'm rocking a Tottenham kit right now that I've got. Just for Zach.
I think it's
Yeah.
about time we put Zach out of his misery and let him have his combat corner time, but I will just quickly, for the sake of things, state Liverpool top of the league, Liverpool top of the league. Zach, are you ready to talk about people punching each other? Never mind, sorry, Maayan has something to say.
One last thing about the soccer segment. I just wanted, this happened like 20-ish minutes ago. I just wanted to update you guys. Barcelona are up 2-0 against Celta Vigo. I've been watching I've been watching the game this entire time, just on my phone here. Robert Lewandowski scored the second goal. So
You did.
looking like a pretty. Wait, did you know?
No, it just...
I did know.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Someone knew.
Well, yeah. Looking like a pretty comfortable win for Barcelona, who, hold on, might make it 3 here.
Yeah. I would love to talk more about Barca, because they've been one of my favorite
he's at
teams
the
to watch.
post. Okay.
May I
Rafinha nearly
speak?
scored a second of the game. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead. I'm done now.
Good lord. Okay. Zach, are you ready?
I am.
All right. Might have to talk faster to keep mine out. Anyway, UFC 309 this past weekend. John Jones retaining his heavyweight belt. What do we think comes next for him? Is he going to fight Tom Aspinall? And if he does, how does that go?
I personally think he will, but it'll be like pulling teeth to get anything to happen because, to put it nicely, John Jones and Dana White have not liked each other since Barack Obama's first term as president. Like, they've had issues going back to at least 2012. And there's never really been a resolution to any of them. Like, John Jones, to MMA fans, is very, very famously a difficult personality, to put it nicely. Like, he's one of the 2 greatest fighters of all time. But the problem is that he very rarely gets the chance to showcase it because he cannot stop getting out of his own way. Like, he will, if it's hit and runs, if it's failed drug tests, if it's just vacating his titles, he is the master at getting in his own way, and it has quite frankly overshadowed a lot of his career. And this is one of those instances, I feel like, with this whole Tom Aspinall debate, where in insisting that he's not avoiding the fight, he just keeps digging himself a bigger and bigger hole as to how he's avoiding the fight with Tom Aspinall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. Let's say when the fight does get booked, how do you anticipate it goes once they're actually in the octagon?
I will still at the minute favor John Jones, but that's because I've watched since I was about 10 years old. Everyone say, oh yeah, this guy's going to be the guy to do it. This guy's going to be the guy to do it. And at a certain point, you kind of have to take the hint and not fully believe it. But I don't think it'll be a total one-sided can crushing. I can totally see, if you take like the Dominic Reyes fight, for example, in 2020, where a lot of people think John Jones lost it. If Aspinall can close the distance very well and blitz like Reyes did on John Jones, who makes his money on the feet as a very long-range point-fighting striker, I think he can have a lot of success because Tom Aspinall is a 6'5", 250-pound man who moves like a 170-pound welterweight. And if he can dial that in, not have any fear of the takedown, because he also has a very good grappling pedigree. So if he can mix in takedowns, defend takedowns well, keep it on the feet, he has a route to victory. The problem is that his biggest strength in terms of creating height also might be his biggest weakness in terms of this slab-headed idiot trying to predict the fight, is that he averages about 2.5 minutes a fight. So he's had, I think, genuinely less than 20 minutes of fight time. So there's very little to go off of to show strengths and weaknesses. So that's what makes it so difficult, is that neither of these guys have really fought that much as a heavyweight in the UFC. Like John Jones has 2 fights as a UFC heavyweight. They're 2 years apart almost, and 4 years removed from anything else that he had done, and also not the most difficult tests, to put it nicely. Like Cyril Gahn, I believe it's very clear now, is an awful grappler. Like Francis Ngannou took him down and won the fight. John Jones took him down and won the fight, submitted him in about 2.5 minutes. And Stipe Miocic, the last time he had won a UFC fight was when Donald Trump was president the first time. And he has not had a single UFC victory over someone who is still currently in the promotion. So that should show you how long it's been since he had been the top heavyweight that they've been promoting him as.
I think what I've heard a lot, I don't know too much about John Jones in general. I've just been getting more into boxing and I guess MMA as well, is that people are comparing it to what Jake Paul did against Mike Tyson, where he just picked on an old man. I know it's a bit different with Miocic because he's like not nearly as old as Mike Tyson is, but kind of that same general idea. And also, you know, John Jones is a lot better than Jake Paul ever will be in the sport of boxing. But yeah.
In a very broad strokes way, absolutely. Because Stipe Miocic had not fought since early 2021 when he'd been knocked out by Francis Ngannou. That was his last fight before getting another chance at the world heavyweight title.
Yeah. Just moving off of Jones and Aspinall onto another fight that was on the 309 card. We saw Charles Oliveira defeat Michael Chandler. Do you think that we will see Oliveira take on Max Holloway for the BMF title? And to those of you at home who may be wondering what BMF stands for, it does stand for what you think it stands for.
Yes, it does stand for the Brittany Mahomes fan club.
God damn it.
Tough crowd. Yeah, I could see it just because, like, I don't know in how much of a rush Oliveira is to fight down the rankings, let's call it. And Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champion, through no fault of his own, really is a once-a-year fighter a lot of the time. And as he's already booked to fight, it could genuinely be a while before the opportunity comes. So he may just have to take a stay-busy fight. And it'll be interesting to see the rematch with Holloway because they fought once before in Saskatoon in 2015. And that ended in about a minute due to a injury.
Was gonna bring up UFC 310. I'm not sure we have time for that, so we'll go on to the event that you seem so excited to talk about before the show. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fought for some reason. Why?
Yeah.
What might come next for Mike, it's pretty easy to tell, more retirement. What might come next for Jake? And the question on everyone's mind, why was Mike Tyson's ass broadcast to the world?
The fact that he kissed his son on the cheek right before it.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that part.
Yeah, because his son was interviewing him. He's like, love his son, kisses him on the cheek, and then turns around and it's just his ass.
Well, some questions are better left unanswered, so I'm not going to answer any more questions about Mike Tyson's rear end. But I was very, to people I knew, I was very public about how little I liked this fight. I was not comfortable with it. I believe the Texas Athletic Commission should be ashamed of themselves for sanctioning it. And I don't think we should see Mike Tyson in a sanctioned prize fight ever again. I don't think we should have seen him in a sanctioned prize fight before this, given that his last fight was almost 20 years ago and he looked awful fighting a journeyman. Yeah, it's a very interesting lesson, I suppose, for the sport in that people always say power is the last thing to go for a fighter. And there's a reason they say it's the last thing to go is the key word there. It does leave you. It's not there forever. I'm not a fan of it. It's disappointing to me that a fight like this is probably the biggest platform the sport will get again. Like, it will go from the 70s or even the 90s when you had guys like Holyfield, Tyson, Frank Bruno, Lennox Lewis, George Foreman, to now you're having people desperate to relive the glory days in a novelty act, trying to relive the glory days on the biggest platform you can get. And it's just a very disappointing thing to me in that this could have been such a better opportunity, and I don't know if it'll really get that just because of how much of a sour taste the main event seems to have left for everyone.
Yeah.
Zach, I will have one more question for you, but I need to quickly cut to Maayan, who has...
So Barcelona went down to 10 men. Mark Casado, I'm not sure how to say his last name. Got a second yellow. Casado, yeah. And Celta Vigo have now scored twice in the past, 4 minutes. It's
2 minutes, actually.
Okay, whatever you say. Yeah, it's 2-2. And they're looking way more likely to win it than Barcelona are. Obviously, the momentum swinging a certain way. They've got one more player on the pitch. I do want to talk about those fights, though, from that night. The Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, not as much, because Zach already touched on it. It was kind of just sad. It was an old man getting beat up, and I think Jake Paul definitely held back a little bit, right? It was just sad. And I mean, he didn't want to knock the guy out, because then it's why?
You just knocked out an old man who's a legend of the sport.
Before we go to the other two fights I think you want to talk about, can I just add one more point to that fight?
Sure.
It was even worse, especially for a style like Mike Tyson with the peekaboo style, where that style has two heavyweight champions associated with it. Mike Tyson and Floyd Patterson. They were both done by the age of 30 in terms of at the top level, because Floyd Patterson's back was gone by the time he was 29, 30. Mike Tyson, it was part lifestyle, part the style as well that he fought in. And Mike Tyson, in a style that had him finished at the top level arguably at 30, he's now trying to make a comeback at twice that age. Even if it's against an infinitely lower level boxer, there's no way it really works, because it's also such a style that requires fantastic reactions for the head movement preemptively, speed, explosiveness to close the distance so well. I can't criticize Mike Tyson for taking the fight, because his entire life is based around having the balls to step in and take fights like that.
It's also a lot of money.
There's also many comma signs on that paycheck he got.
The $20 million is probably pretty enticing.
Yeah, but it's just disappointing for everyone around him who let him do it in a way.
I will say, if someone offered me $20 million to get beat up, I would probably have signed the contract before you finished the sentence.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's why it's I can't criticize the fighter for taking the money, because at the end of the day, it's called prize fighting for a reason. Anyway, carry on, Maayan.
Yeah, so I guess there were 3 other fights that night. One of them I didn't really know much about. I know that, what was his name? Wunderson Nunes, the guy who lost against...
The other one.
Yeah, I don't remember his name. It was, at one point, the guy started humping him. It was just a bit weird. But that was a pretty decent fight overall. And then the next 2 after that were just, one of them was a championship fight. It was the Ramos against Barrios, and it was just like Barrios was the champion, I think, right? And
Yeah.
he went into it in the first like 5 rounds, absolutely dominated, like out of 12, right? And knocked Ramos down once or maybe twice, I'm not sure. But yeah, it was just complete domination. Suddenly, one punch from Ramos, Barrios gets knocked down. Fight gets completely turned around. He wins like 4 or 5 rounds in a row. They end up tying. I just thought it was a great fight overall. I don't know. I don't really have much of an analysis here. Like, I'm not the most knowledgeable guy on this case. Did you watch that fight? Do you have anything else to say about it?
Yeah, I'm curious to see where Barrios goes from here, to be honest, because I'd always kind of seen him as very much a paper champion. Because like he's always been kind of in and about just because of favors and being a very good company guy. So I think they'll kind of carry on with him like that, where he won't ever really be they'll advertise him as, because he is technically a 2-weight world champion in the loosest possible sense of that term. But I think he'll be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll essentially just be a titleist, basically, at best.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
that Taylor Serrano fight.
Event.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like I want to be careful in saying that, because I don't want to take away from Katie Taylor's performance, because she did put up like a stellar performance.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how you can look at that fight and say that she put up a better performance than Serrano did.
Yeah. It was also like, Zach, I talked to you a little bit about it. It was like you told me it's a tactic that Katie Taylor uses all the time, where she kind of just leans her head into the opponent. She was warned about it a bunch of times with the headbutt. Like, it's just a bit dirty. And I get it. Like, it does win her fights, and obviously it did in this case, whether it was fair or not, whatever you have to say about it. But yeah, I thought both were exceptional. It was the first women's fight I'd ever actually seen, because I've watched like 4 or 5 fights in my life overall. But yeah, it was a great fight, and nonetheless, I think Serrano, like the way she was bleeding, was really just crazy to me. Obviously, you see it all the time, and you see a lot worse in boxing and MMA and whatnot. But still, it's like, it's just insane that she keeps going through that, and like in my eyes, should have won the fight even with that. Yeah, just insane.
Yeah, it feels a bit disappointing. I don't know right now if I'd go as far as calling it a robbery, because they're both.
Okay.
There was a very close fight, but I do believe Serrano won both times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of disappointing that probably the biggest fight that can be made in women's boxing right now, between two quite comfortably first ballot Hall of Famers. Like Katie Taylor was for a very long time probably the best women's fighter in the world. Amanda Serrano is a 7-weight world champion.
Yeah.
So it's disappointing that on such a big platform, with two of maybe the 2 best ever in women's boxing, and all the discourse around it isn't the instant classic of a fight that came with it. It's 3 pieces of paper afterwards that were a bit iffy.
Yeah.
It just is such a boxing thing to have happen. And
it's
that is
kind of
not a good thing you want to hear.
It's kind of reminiscent of, and I'm going to ask you something about this man in just a second, which you're going to absolutely love my question. It's kind of like the Triple G Canelo fights, where Triple G almost certainly won 2 of the 3, but I believe it got scored as a draw and 2 wins for Canelo in the trilogy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, like it should be probably 1-1-1 at absolute best for Canelo, I'd say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He won the third fight, I would say, but...
Yeah, but that was quite over the hill. Didn't care about the sport.
That was...
Golovkin.
By that point, it was... Yeah. Speaking of Canelo, you're, again... I apologize for making you answer questions about this man repeatedly. The man who beat up a geriatric Mike Tyson did call out Canelo Alvarez, and has received call-outs from light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev. I'm not going to ask, would Jake Paul lose to these guys? I'm going to ask,
how badly?
Does Jake Paul survive fighting either of them? At least with all of his teeth.
So you know how at the very start of this part of the conversation I said the Texas Commission should be ashamed of themselves for sanctioning this fight? I firmly believe the same for whatever commission would sanction Jake Paul versus Daniel Dubois. Because I know Daniel Dubois has the personality of a damp crayon, and couldn't draw money if you gave him a green crayon and some paper. But the man is a legitimately pedigreed amateur boxer, 6'6", a heavyweight world champion, and has knocked out all but one opponent he's ever faced.
Yeah.
Like he's 24-2 with 23 knockouts against world-class boxers. I mean this in the nicest way possible. If you sign off on that man fighting Jake Paul, you should be put in a prison cell.
Yeah.
And I'm not even getting started on Beterbiev, because Beterbiev might have arguably a better boxing pedigree and is also the undisputed light heavyweight champion.
Absolute nuke of a left hand.
Both hands. There is a video clip going around of him on the internet that I've sent to a few people where he's hitting a wall bag, and it sounds like a sniper. And he's knocked out just about the first time he had gone to a decision was his last fight in October, and he had been 20 fights unbeaten before that. So he is a fantastic technical boxer with hands of stone to follow up with it. And it's disappointing that there's a need to ride on the coattails of the Disney kid with a horrifically balding hairline just to be able to get some attention to the sport. Maybe
you should go visit Austin Matthews in Munich. Anyway, with that, I think we are actually out of time. We are more than out of time. Just for reference to Maayan and Jamo, the amount of time we have spent on the non-Canuck segments is normally longer than the entire show.
Yeah.
This is going to be a fun one. Zach, I'm going to apologize in advance for what you have to edit. Thank you to everyone for listening this far. If you have gotten this far in, why? Thank you to Maayan for coming on. Thank you to Jamo for coming on. Glad to have you guys. Zach, also want to say good luck to Castaway Wanderers, where Ryan Gervitz is this weekend. That's his rugby team. Zach, anything you want to say to close us off?
In the immortal words of John Jones, don't wreck the Bentley.